This is the third rod I built. This is the X-Ray Blank, made by Gary Loomis. This is a 7-10-9 blank. It means it's 7 foot 10 inches long, mag heavy power. It actually was 7 foot 10 inches, but I ended up cutting 4 inches off the butt section down here, so it fit in the back of my pickup. And another thing was I actually got another one of these in a replacement, as this specific one had the tip damaged, where the tip top that I got would not fit on it. So I got a warranty replacement for it. They sent me the replacement, and they didn't ask for this one back. So what I did is I cut about a ½ inch off the tip of this rod and just ordered a little bit bigger tip for it, and it's all good now. And I still had a brand new one that they sent me, and I had a friend of mine who had a X-Ray Blank SJ736 that he had a warranty replacement for something very, very small. I don't even know if you can see it, just a few little imperfections on the blank there, which is not going to have anything to do to affect the performance. So we ended up trading. So he got my extra mag heavy, and I got this SJ736 for free, basically. So that's going to be my 5th build right there. And like I said, I just ended up cutting about a ½ inch off the tip of this one, ordering a little bit bigger of a tip that's going to fit this one. And then the tip that I had for this one is now on the SJ736. Ended up fitting perfect. So that worked out good. I ended up getting a free blank. My friend ended up getting a free blank. We didn't need 2 of the same rods, so that worked out great. Now, as far as the components, I have CFX carbon composite handles down here. I have the EC22 butt cap. I have the American Tackle G2 Vibe reel seat. Now this is the only one that I have that isn't carbon. This is actually the graphite version. Still a pretty sweet looking reel seat. And I still got the carbon insert underneath that. And I still have the G2 carbon sleeve cover here. I put a diamond wrap on it because this is a mag heavy rod. I wasn't really worried about the weight of it, adding any extra weight, so I went ahead and made it look a little bit nicer. Got my custom logo here in silver with red outline, kind of just like the rest of my custom decals. And I have that bordered in black and red thread. I also spiral wrap this rod, meaning the first guide is going to be on top like a normal casting guide. The second one's going to be angled off to the side at, I believe that's 90 degrees. And then the third one is going to be underneath like a spinning rod, along with the remaining of the guides are going to be on the bottom of the rod, just like a spinning rod would be. And that's called a spiral wrap. Some people call it a acid wrap. And the first rod I built is also done like that. So this has a total of 11 guides. These are the Fuji Alconite Guides. This is a rod that I'm not going to be using a whole lot. I don't fish a whole lot of heavy cover or frog a lot, and that's what this rod's going to be used for. But my collection just feels a little bit empty if I don't have a big heavy rod in it. You know, there are times when there's some real nasty stuff where you need a big heavy beast of a rod. This is rated up to 2 ounces. Did black thread wrapping, straight black. So again, I just wanted to show you a little bit of it, the finished product, before I show you some of the process of me building it. I'll show you of me cutting the 4 inches off the bottom of it. I use a Dremel tool with a cutting blade for that. Same with the tip top, cutting off a 1/2 inch, I use a Dremel tool. And the reel I'm thinking about putting on it right now is going to be my Daiwa Tatula SV, because it's great for pitching and flipping, and it's an 8:1 gear ratio reel. I think it's a pretty sweet looking rod. It's a little bling to it with that diamond wrap. Put my hook keeper on top this time. My other rods, I put it on the bottom. Got one double foot guide, and the rest are going to be size 5. Pretty small guides. As I said, a total of 11 guides, not including the tip top. And then I ended up getting that free X-Ray SJ736 that I'll be building here very shortly. Alright, now I'll show you some of the process it took to build the rod. Okay, so I have my third build I'm getting ready to start on. This is another NFC X-Ray Blank. This is the 7109. This is so it's actually 7 foot 10 inches long, mag heavy power. So it's rated up to 2 ounces. It's 7 foot 10 inches, but I'm going to be cutting probably about 4 or 5 inches off of that at the butt section, just so it will fit in the bed of my truck a little bit easier. I'm going to be using CFX carbon fiber grip handles. I have a little butt cap here, slides on the end of that. That will get glued down. This is the reel seat. It's made of 3 components actually. There's an insert inside of it that goes over the rod blank, so you have something to glue to the rod blank, because the reel seat actually has exposed blank in it. And if I slide it on, it's going to be really loose on the blank. So I need to put the insert on it, which will be a little bit tighter of a fit. Actually, where I'm putting it on this rod, I'm gonna slide it all the way down to it fits snug. So I'm not even gonna need any arbors or anything. I'm just gonna put glue on it, slide it all the way down to where it's tight. Put the measure where the handle goes, and then I'm gonna cut the remaining 4 to 5 inches off that's left over. That goes on the rod blank. The reel seat goes over the insert, and you'll glue the reel seat to the insert. And this part right here also will get glued over that section to hide the threads. This is a American Tackle G2 carbon fiber sleeve here. I have that on my first 2 builds that I built. Just think it adds a nice little look. Matches my insert real good. But that's going to be the handle setup basically. Again, that's CFX carbon fiber grips, American Tackle Vibe reel seat, and American Tackle carbon insert, American Tackle carbon sleeve cover, and the guides are going to be Fuji guides. Got 11 of them, and I have a Fuji Arowana titanium SIC tip top with a hook keeper also in this package. So them are the components, and the first thing I'm going to be doing is finding the spine on the blank, which I don't know if I'll be able to record or not. If you guys want to see how to do that, I'm sure you can look up on another video on YouTube. There's plenty out there. But I'll set the butt section down on the floor. I'll grab towards the upper section of the rod, and I'll kind of spin it, roll it around on my fingers to find out where the spine is on the rod. That way I know where to put my guides at, and line up my reel seat and my handle according to the spine of the blank on the rod. And then after that, I will be reaming the inside of this handle with my homemade reamer, sliding that down. That will get glued on along with the end section butt cap here will get glued onto the handle. The insert, I'm going to slide that all the way down, glue that down, put the reel seat over that, put a little bit of glue in the places on the reel seat that's not going to be exposed of glue. Even though when you do slide the reel seat over this insert, you're still going to get a little bit of glue up in here, so you're going to have to wipe off. I mean, that's pretty much unavoidable. Just be ready with a rag and some alcohol. And then gotta glue my little sleeve cover down over the thread section. That basically just loosens the reel seat. And then after the handle, grip, reel seat section is assembled, I can start aligning my guides, getting those wrapped, putting epoxy over those. Again, it's going to be probably 2 to 3 coats. More likely 3 coats, because this is going to be a mag heavy rod intended for heavy cover, so I'm going to need them guides to hold up pretty good. And then I have some custom decals and stuff like that I'll need to put on later. And for that, I got a UV light resin that's going to help me out in that situation, because my experience from first rod that I did with decals is that the edges like to come up on them, even no matter how hard you try and get them air bubbles out, how flat it looks. When you start to put that epoxy over them and it starts to dry and gets on that rod dryer spinning, it starts to get heavier, and them edges like to pop up on you, and it can be a big pain. And it's not just decals, the carbon fiber rod skins were kind of like that. So the solution I found was this UV instant resin. Basically, put a couple dabs on, you smear it on the edges of the decal, and you take a UV light, you focus it on where you put the dabs and where you put the dabs at. And you take a UV light and you hold it over the area for about 15-20 seconds, and it instantly cures the resin. That way it keeps those edges down on the decal and allows you to go ahead and put your normal epoxy coats over it. But that should make my decal work, and any carbon fiber I decide to put on this rod or whatever, that's going to make it a lot easier. Because like I said, from my experience in the first rod build, decals was a pain in the butt. But I'm going to get going here and try to find the spine of the blank. I still got to cut 4 or 5 inches off the rod. I still got to ream the handle here. And I'll try and get as much of this stuff on video as I can. Okay, so I found the spine on the blank of my rod, marked it with the tape and the tag end facing up. That indicates where the spine is. Since it's a casting rod, the guides are going to go on the opposite side of the spine. If it was a spinning rod, they'd go on the same side that I marked the spine. So I got the spine on the blank marked out. I also reamed out my handle here so it slides down the blank to where I want it to go. I did that with a homemade reamer. It's made out of an old Shakespeare mantis fishing rod, some emery cloth, which is basically like small strips of sanding paper, and I spiraled that on using contact cement. And it was a pretty easy job to ream this material out. This is actually the only tool I had to use to do it. It's probably about a ½ inch in diameter this reamer is. And I just had to work it a little bit on the sides to get it big enough because it is a little bit thicker than ½ inch diameter. But this material was pretty easy to ream. So I'll go ahead and slide that down. I'm going to slide my insert down and mark where I need to cut off the blank section at the bottom of the rod. And then I'm going to pull out my Dremel saw and I'm going to cut the blank off by about 4 inches or so. I just wanted to explain my next steps, show you what I've done so far, and I'm going to get busy again. Okay, so I'm getting ready to cut maybe about 2.5 to 3 inches off this blank. Got it taped up nice and tight to prevent the fibers from splitting. This is going to make the rod 7.5 inches. So now I'll just pull the tape off and kind of sand this edge up a little bit. Just taking a little bit of alcohol and a rag here. Getting some of the dust off of it. As you can see, it's a nice, clean, smooth cut. No broken fibers. No damage to the rod blank. Now the rod's 7 foot 5 inches. Gonna fit nicely in the back of my truck bed. Okay, so my next step, I'm gonna be gluing on the handle. So I mixed part A and part B of the Pro Paste, equal parts together. Get ready to mix that together. And I did ream out my handle just a hair too big. So I did have to put just one layer of tape arbor. There, my camera's focusing a little bit better now, but I did have to put one little layer of tape arbor underneath my handle just to make it fit a little bit tighter. And I'll put glue all over this area, and then I'll slide my handle down, twist it over top of the glue. That's what I'm getting ready to do now after I'm done mixing this glue. Okay, so I got the glue put on. Now I just need to take my handle up there and just slide it down over top this glue. And when I slide it down, I'm going to be twisting it. That way I kind of get as much coverage as I can. So I got it slid almost all the way down. You see the glue kind of built up there at the bottom as I slid it down. Now I'm just going to take some of this excess glue, spread it at the bottom of this blank. Go ahead and slide the rest of it down. I'm going to spread some of it up here so my end cap has some glue to bond to when I put the end cap up on there. And when I'm done doing this, I'll just finish sliding it down the blank, throw the end cap on, and all this excess glue, if there's any sticking out, I'll just take some alcohol and a rag and wipe that off. So I just got the carbon fiber handle glued on. Next step's going to be putting the insert for the rear seat on. Probably have to put a couple thin layers of tape arbor underneath that just to get it nice and tight. The rear seat's going to go over the insert. Put a little bit of glue on the insert for the rear seat. And then after that's going to be the foregrip sleeve cover. Just have to glue that on real quick. Pretty simple. And then my bottom section of the rod will be complete, and I'll be able to get started on the guides. Take my mixing stick, put a little bit of glue on it. And kind of just spread it around all the way around. You really don't want to put a whole bunch of glue up top, because when you slide that other piece over, it's going to push all that other glue up, and you're going to have a bunch of excess glue anyway, which you're going to have to wipe off. Now I just take this piece and just kind of give it a little twist as I slide it on. Get about halfway out, I'll kind of slide it back out just to make sure I cover the bottom portion of it real good. As you can see, it's going to create a bunch of mess there. Push it all the way to the top. Get your rag and your alcohol. Pretty much there you have it. That's what it looks like when it's all glued down. Cleaned up with alcohol real nicely. And that's going to go over the, hide the threads on the rear seat. It's going to get glued onto that. As soon as it finishes drying anyway, it's not quite done drying. So this is a Unilock American Tackle Vibe rear seat. And that's where the carbon fiber sleeve is going to go over, so I'm going to go ahead and put some glue over this section. Say the handle section, rear seat section, that stuff's fairly pretty simple, about the easiest part of building a rod. It's when you get to the alignment of the guides and wrapping the guides and getting the epoxy perfect on the guides, doing your stress test, static testing, making sure you got the correct guide spacing on your guides. That's a very important part of it. Putting decals is surprisingly hard to perfect that. I mean, the hardest thing about the handle and the rear seat part is probably, reaming out the handle and getting that fitted correctly. And if you want to add any winding checks, as long as you have a digital caliper, you can get the measurements down on that. But you might have to place a second order for those, because you're going to have your blank first and know where your rear seat and your handle is going to go. before you can order the winding checks and get the measurements for those. I'd say guide alignment and guide spacing, probably the two most important, toughest things to do. I mean, the guide wrapping and the epoxying of guides, I mean, it's somewhat difficult, but you can practice, you know. And there's a little bit of leeway. It might not look the best, but you can get away with it. It's still going to function pretty good. You mess up the static testing, which has to do with the guide spacing, and you know, you could snap a rod just like that if you don't have the correct spacing on your guide setup. But if you know how to do it, the correct static testing, what to look for, it's rather simple. It's just more important than it is difficult. So one of the most difficult things I had was the decal, which has little to do with function of the rod itself. So now I'm just going to twist this foregrip sleeve right over this thread, and pull it back off like I did earlier, just to kind of spread the glue. Wipe some of this excess glue off. It's important to use alcohol and a rag to get this glue off now, you know, before it dries. And these little seams and cracks. It's just going to look like crap later and be pretty impossible to get out. Now I'm just going to give that time to dry, and I'll slide that over the insert that's already glued down on my blank. So I got some more glue mixed here. Getting ready to put a little glue on the insert. Goes under the reel seat, and then I'm going to slide the reel seat over top with the trigger facing aligned up with the spine of the rod. Now I have a exposed blank down here on the reel seat here and here, so I only have a little section where the glue is going to go. So I'm going to put glue at this little thin section right here, down here on the insert, and then down here on this section of the insert. And of course, when I slide the reel seat over the insert, it's going to spread the glue all the way down on top of the insert, so I'm going to have to do some cleaning up. Put a little bit of glue on this tenon for the grip here, because the reel seat is going to slide over top of the handle tenon here. I'm going to go ahead and slide the reel seat over top the insert now, making sure the trigger is lined up to the spine of the blank. Now I just need to grab my rag, some alcohol, and kind of get in these little crevices where there's some glue kind of pushing out the sides of it. Clean that up all nice before it dries. This little seam here where some glue's pushing out of the little crevice right there. But that will clean up nicely with a little bit of alcohol. There you have it. That's CFX carbon grip handle, EC22 butt cap, American Tackle G2 Vibe rail seat with the American Tackle G2 carbon fiber insert underneath, with the American Tackle G2 carbon fiber rail or foregrip sleeve. Pretty nice looking setup so far. Really comfortable grip, lightweight. Got the exposed rail seat for sensitivity. And next thing I'm going to be doing is attaching some micro guide bands and some regular guide bands on the rod blank, so I can stick my guides in there and get the alignment all set up. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is put some guide bands on my blank, and these are to hold the guides in place. At two different sizes here. These actually come in small, medium, and large. This is actually the medium size in this style. And I use this for the thicker diameter of the blank. So what you want to do is just cut it, just thin slits. Now I'll go ahead and stick them on the end of my rod blank. This blanket is a lot thicker than the other ones I've done so far, so I might not even need the micro guide bands that I have here. That's for when you get more towards the tip. This diameter right here is a little bit too loose for it. It doesn't hold the guides tightly in place. But it seems so far that this blank right here is seems a little bit thicker, and I might be able to get away with just using this even towards the tip. But my first guide usually goes about 20 inches from the rail seat, so I slide the first band just in about the proximate position. I don't need to measure out just yet or anything. I can fix that all later when I go to do the static testing on it. Anyways, I just cut a few pieces of these. Seeing how thick the guide is, I'm probably going to need more than 3 of these. I have 11 guides, so I'll need 11 total guide bands. So I got my first band in place. I have 11 in total. Right now it's just in the approximate position. I haven't measured it from the rail seat or anything. And you just stick your guide in there, and that holds it in place while you wrap it or do the stress test. And I'll do that with each of the 11 guides. And you have general measurements about where you want to space your guides at. You know, you'll get them aligned as best you can in the general area of where they go, and then you'll go ahead and throw your reel in the rail seat, run line through it, put weight at the end of the line, and run a static test and see if you got the right spacing between the guides. And you'll know if there's any droops in the line, or if the line drops below the blank, and you might have to move some guides around, move them closer, move them farther back from each other, depending whether you're getting spaces in between them or not. You might even have to add a guide. Sometimes you might have too many guides and you're able to remove a guide, which is always good if you can. It reduces weight. But I haven't quite decided if I'm going to do another spiral wrap on this rod or not. So I'm thinking if, since it's a longer rod, if I do a spiral wrap, I might actually need an extra guide. Really don't want to wait on ordering another guide. So I might just actually do a traditional casting setup on this with the guides on top. But right now I'm going to go ahead and get my guide sorted out. Like, this is a size 7 double foot guide, and I believe I have one size 6 belly guide, and then the rest are size 5 runner guides, and that will lead to a size 5 tip. So it's a total of 11 guides, not including the tip top. Basically, when you do a static test to get the guide spacing light, you want to have the line pretty much equal length below the rod at all times. You don't want any like sagging down here in between guides. You want a nice equal space throughout the blank. If you do get any sagging between the guides, you'll need to move the guides a little bit closer together. You might even need to add a guide. You hold the rod up at an angle, put some weight at the end of the line. You can see this is a spiral wrap, so it transitions to the bottom. For a casting rod, you just want to make sure the line doesn't drop below the blank. Everything looks fairly even though, so I can go ahead and put the thread down on my guides. I already put the tip top on, but I just wanted to show you real quick. It's pretty easy. This is an old cheap tip top of mine. See how it's hollow inside? That slides over the tip of the rod blank. This is the adhesive glue that you use. I always just take a knife and I'll just shave a couple shavings, a couple thin shavings, and then I'll kind of stuff it down in the little tube. Sometimes you might need a little tool to help you get it down, pack it down in there real nice and tight. But once you do that, you can go ahead and take a lighter, or I like to use my alcohol burner. Go ahead and light the alcohol burner. Melt the glue inside the tip top, and then I'll just go ahead and slide it right on the end of my rod. Make sure it's aligned with the rest of the guides, and that's pretty much it. So I got 11 guides wrapped. I got my tip top glued on. I have my handle carbon fiber handle done. I got my carbon fiber insert, foregrip sleeve on. Got my guides on and aligned. I got them wrapped. I got this decorative metallic little section here placed. Now I had to put this on before I put any of the guides on, because you can't get it on after you put the guides on. So I had to go ahead and lie that on there first, wrap all the guides first, and then I came back to that and went ahead and threaded the ends of that down. And then I had to cut the excess that was hanging out on each side of that, clean that up. Got my hook keeper right there. And epoxy, we'll go over all this stuff. And then in between these two red thread wraps will be my rod logo with my rod specs, and then my custom decals that I ordered, which is going to look like this. But since this is an unfinished blank, this blank isn't exactly smooth. You can see these little lines right here, and it's unsanded, so it's not smooth. If you try to put a decal over them, there'll be little gaps and air pockets, which makes it a pain. So before you put any decals on this type of rod, you have to put a thin layer of epoxy down first, let that dry, and then put your decals over that, and then put another coat of epoxy on top of your decals. Okay, I'm going to start putting my first coat of finish over this hook keeper and this decorative piece I got. And then I got to put a thin piece over the blank where my decal's going to go. First coat's just going to be real thin, just want to kind of saturate the threads. just going to put a thin layer over this bare rod blank here, just get a smooth surface so my decals have a place to bond to. Okay, so I'm applying my custom decal that I got from Decal Connection. And I took the backing off, and I'm just starting to smooth the center of the decal right now, making sure there's no air bubbles. Edges are definitely the hardest part on these decals. They have a habit of wanting to pop up, especially when you put epoxy on. So you definitely want to pay close attention to those. It's not the edge right here, because this is actually a top backing that allows you to touch the decal. I'll pull that off. You actually see the line underneath where the actual decal is, and that's the edge you kind of want to work on. Make sure that you get nice and airtight, no bubbles. And even then, once you get epoxy on and it starts to dry and get a little bit heavier, it can still be a bit of a pain. So that's why I found another solution to that, which I'll be showing you here shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this top backing off. make sure you don't put any fingerprints, get any oil, any of that type of stuff on the decal itself, or the epoxy won't want to stick to that particular section where the oil and residue from your fingerprints or your hand or whatever it is. But so far I'm liking the way that logo is looking. As far as making sure those edges stay down when I put epoxy on, use this stuff right here. This is called Solarex. It's a UV cure resin, and there's some different brands of it. This is one of the best. And what you do is you put a couple dabs along the edges of the decal, and then you kind of smooth it out. And then you take a UV light and you just hold the UV light over that section for about 15 seconds, and it instantly cures it. So it secures those edges down to the blank, so they don't want to come unraveled or unstuck when you go ahead and put that epoxy on. It begins to dry and get a little bit heavier. Take a Q-tip, I'll kind of smear that across the edge of the decal there. Just want to focus right where I put that resin. Usually takes about 15-20 seconds in each spot, depending on how fresh your batteries are, and that will instantly cure that resin.
Perfect.